encourage people on the right side of the political spectrum to get involved and politics and those kind of things, and rethink the issues of capital punishment. Became motivated by none other than Ron Paul, of course, and I think we see that name come up quite a bit, and we're grateful for him bringing us all into the fold. But right now, Matt is partners with Retain Just Nebraska to educate voters on the issues leading up to the critical ballot question coming up here this November. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Maly.
Thanks a lot, Scott. Thanks for having me this morning. It's great to be here to talk with you guys. As you said, I run the Nebraska chapter of a group called Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty, which is a nationwide organization. We've been endorsed by Richard Viguerie, Jay Sekulow, Dr. Ron Paul, of course, and we've got state chapters all over the country. Nebraska, obviously, Washington, Tennessee, Missouri, Kentucky, New Hampshire, and we're really experiencing a lot of growth. A lot more people on the right side of the political spectrum and a lot more people within the liberty movement are starting to say enough is enough. We do not trust the government to kill people anymore. So we've especially seen growth, of course, right here in Nebraska. If you don't know, last year our legislature voted to repeal the death penalty and replace it with life without parole, which was a wonderful accomplishment, something we've been working for decades. Unfortunately, just days after that vote, the governor and his allies put hundreds of thousands of dollars into a referendum effort to put the issue on the ballot, so it is going to be on the ballot this coming November. So my group, Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty, has partnered with Retain Just Nebraska, which is the official ballot question committee that will be doing the campaigning through this summer and fall. We're doing phone banking, we're knocking on doors, we're going to do everything we can to get our message out there. So today, we don't have too terribly much time, so I'll be brief, and then I'll be hanging out all day, so I'd love to chat with you guys individually about more specifics. But I want to do three things. I want to just give you some facts and information about the death penalty itself. I want to talk about why this is so important for the cause of liberty, what's libertarian about this, and then I want to give you some specifics about things you can do to get involved if you're so inclined. And while I talk, I'm going to pass around a sign-up sheet so we can just get it going while I'm talking, and we can pass that around. And there you can fill it out if you'd like with your info, and there's a place to check if you'd like to volunteer or write a letter to the editor to help us out. Even if you don't have the time for that, we'd love to get your info just to give you occasional email updates about events that our campaign has coming up and things like that if you're interested. So let's talk, a kind of brief overview of the issue. And the Libertarian Party is officially against the death penalty, the only political party in the state of Nebraska to do so. So you are to be commended for that. Way to go. And I'm assuming that most everyone in this room is pretty much made up their mind as to how they're going to vote on this ballot question in November. And I would hope that most everyone here consider themselves against capital punishment. But there may be some in the room who haven't made up their mind, and that's okay. And even those who are supportive, I think it's important that our campaign is equipping allies with facts. Even if you're against the death penalty, it's probably not an issue you've given too terribly much thought to, because it's not something that affects too many of us personally. So I want to make sure that you know the right things to say as you're discussing this with friends and neighbors and coworkers and the people in your church, the people in your community. This isn't a vote that the legislature took lightly. They made this decision after decades of thoughtful and thorough conversation, and now we're going to have a conversation like that among voters. So this topic is going to be talked about in our community, like it or not, and we have to know what to say to bring people on our side. So the death penalty is a big government program. That's the best way to think about it. At the end of the day, it's just like any other bureaucracy. It takes too long, it's too expensive, and it doesn't work. And that should be no surprise to us as libertarians. Duh, if you put the government in charge of something like this, obviously they're going to screw it up. They screw up everything. We know that. And one of the big problems is the cost. It's significantly more expensive to try to execute someone than it is to put them in prison for the rest of their life. And why is that? It seems counterintuitive. The reason is threefold. First, you've got the lengthy and complex initial trial. In Nebraska, there's a whole extra phase to a capital case. It takes a lot more of the court's time and costs the taxpayers a lot more. Then you've got the appeals process that goes on for years and years and years and years, sometimes decades. And then you've got the housing, where we really don't save any money. because most people who are sentenced to death don't end up being executed. They end up waiting forever and dying of natural causes or having their sentences commuted. Even those who are executed spend an average of 17 years on death row in between sentence and execution, so that's plenty of housing and meals and security. And it costs more to keep them on death row than in the general population. So we're spending millions of dollars extra, additional, up front on the trial. We're getting no savings on the back end. And for what purpose? For what purpose? Nebraska's had 3 executions since the 70s at an estimated cost of $15 million each. One of the stories I love to tell is Richardson County in the southeast corner of our state, that's Falls City. They pursued 2 capital cases and nearly went bankrupt. They had to mortgage their ambulances and eventually go back to the state to get bailed out, basically, to keep the county's finances afloat. Now, one of those 2 guys was sentenced to death, and he spent 35 years there until he passed away of natural causes last spring. The sister of his victim has been one of the most outspoken opponents of the death penalty as it's been discussed in the legislature. So look at that situation. They nearly went bankrupt as a county. They put that family through decades of agony and prolonged their pain, and the guy was never even executed. There's government at its finest, right? That's what government always does. They screw it up in every possible way. So it's too expensive, and like I mentioned, it's not best for victims. Many people who have lost loved ones to murder prefer sentences of life without parole. The reason is because that's real justice that's served immediately and anonymously. With the death penalty, that's justice that may be served on one particular day at some point in the future. But for one thing, it makes a celebrity out of the killer, and it forces these families to relive the gory details of their loved one's murder as it comes up in the newspaper and on TV and on radio again and again and again, appeal after appeal after appeal. And for most of these families who are promised the ultimate punishment, they never see it come. They wait for decades and decades, and then it's an empty promise from our state. So it's not best for victims. It's also not fair. We hear a lot, and we're going to hear a lot leading up to this election, that we need the death penalty just for the worst of the worst, right? Only for the most heinous of cases. And that may be nice, but the problem is that's not who this system affects. The death penalty disproportionately affects racial minorities, disproportionately affects people who are too poor to afford their own attorney, and it disproportionately affects people from particular areas, not just death penalty states versus not death penalty states, but about half of death row's population right now comes from 2% of the counties. That's 15 individual counties where the prosecutors love to go after the death penalty. A lot of it lies on the prosecutor's discretion, what sentence they're going to pursue. And so some prosecutors don't go after the death penalty at all because it's too dang expensive. Others consider it a mark of pride in their career. I must be a good prosecutor because look how many people I got sent to the chair. Which is kind of sick if you ask me, but some prosecutors are like that. So you could commit identical crimes on either side of Harrison Street. One guy gets the death penalty and one guy doesn't, regardless of the heinousness of their crimes. So it may be nice if we could have a system that only gets the worst of the worst, but the death penalty really is a system that targets poor black men who live in the wrong counties. And that's really blunt, but that's the reality of the broken system that we have, and that's the system that the governor and his allies are trying to bring back. Why would we want a system like that that doesn't work in Nebraska? The last reason that I'll talk about right now, at least, there's plenty more reasons that I'd love to share with you, but they make mistakes. They make way too many mistakes. Since the 70s, it's like the modern era of the death penalty. There's been 1,434 executions in the United States. In that same time period, there's been 156 innocent people exonerated from death rows. That's about 1 exoneration for every 9 executions. Now in Nebraska, we happen to have exactly 10 men on death row. So if we execute 9 of them, statistically speaking, the other's likely to be innocent. Which one's innocent, I have no idea. But I do know that there's nothing more horrifying than the thought of executing the wrong person. You can release somebody from jail, you can't release them from the grave. Again, as libertarians, this should come as no surprise because we know the government screws everything up. We don't trust them with our health care. We don't trust them to deliver the mail. We don't even trust them to fill the dad-blamed potholes. So how the hell can we trust that same government to make life and death decisions with perfect accuracy? It's not going to happen. They're going to screw it up. And that's why this cause is so important for the Libertarian Party and for the broader liberty movement. This is a real big thing for Nebraska. This is the first time the death penalty has been directly on the ballot in a red state ever. It's been on the ballot twice directly for voters to consider the death penalty. Both of those times were in California. So this is the first red state to consider this as voters, and legislators across the country are going to be watching to see what Nebraska does. So we're in a key position not just to end the death penalty in our state once and for all, but we can end this across the country. And this is something that is, you know, really important for liberty. I work with a lot of Republican groups, and I tell them that you can be a Republican and be on either side of this issue, which is true. The same is not, however, true for libertarians. This is, you can't really be a libertarian and allow the government to have the power to kill its own citizens. This is not just some kind of extra little thing. Dr. Ron Paul doesn't say, by the way, I'm against the death penalty. He says, until capital punishment is completely abolished, we will have neither a free nor a just society. So this is fundamental to who we are and what we believe in. And here's an opportunity where the Republicans and Democrats are actually right? Even a broken clock is right twice a day. And, you know, consider it a fluke or an exception or whatever. Here we have even the most liberal Democrats who are saying, let's take this power away from government because they're abusing it and it costs too much and it doesn't work. And that's kind of what got me to be involved with this issue, is like, whoa, look at what's coming out of these Republicans' mouths, you know, that they're actually trying to get rid of a government program that doesn't work. They're trying to decrease government power. And as libertarians, you know, there's a lot of things we'd like to see done, but we just don't have the numbers, unfortunately. And for me, I'm sick and tired of losing. You know, we put up great candidates, be it in the Libertarian Party or you know, Libertarian Republicans, and they get their butts kicked. But here's a case where the Republicans and Democrats have already put together a coalition that's doing this work, and it's close. And we have a real chance to win this. So I think we need to seize the opportunity and work with the Republicans and Democrats to get this done for the sake of liberty, right? That's why I think this is so important. Some specific things that you can do to get involved if you'd like. You know, we're doing the traditional campaign things at Retain Adjust Nebraska, and then some. So we need all the help we can get if you're interested in making calls or knocking doors. We have a campaign headquarters in Omaha. We do phone banking events in Lincoln. We have the capability to get you doing phone banking remotely if you're living outstate Nebraska. And we're also, you know, looking for any opportunity we have to get this message out there. There's a lot of Nebraskans who haven't made up their mind yet. And so if you're a part of any kind of a network or organization, we would love to provide you with resources. We'd love to send a speaker to your PTA or your Bible study or your Rotary Club or whatever it is. You know, we're not giving up. We're going to do everything we possibly can to defeat this effort to bring back the death penalty. And with you guys' help, we can do it. You know, we can end the most egregious and irrevocable abuse of government power that there is or ever could be. The power of a fallible state to kill its own citizens, some guilty, some innocent. If liberty activists get involved, we can create a Nebraska where executions are only read about in history books and never again in newspapers. So this is a huge opportunity for us to promote the cause of liberty. I really hope you'll join us. One last thing I didn't mention, I always should, is that the ballot question is going to be really confusing. The wording is sort of a double negative. The question isn't actually the death penalty, it's the bill that got rid of the death penalty. So it will say, shall the state of Nebraska retain or repeal LB 268 passed by the 104th legislature, yashala, and the bubble to mark is retain, to keep that bill. You'll mark retain to keep the bill that got rid of the death penalty already. That is the status quo. We did get rid of it. We won, and now we have to win again. So I think I'd probably use any time that there may have been for questions, but I'll be around throughout the day. I'd love to chat with you individually about how we can get you guys and your networks, you know, plugged into our campaign so that we can win this thing. Thanks a lot.